This era is over soon, I swear. Schizophrenia is so in right now. It's the latest fashion trend, and if you're not thoughtlessly appropriating its aesthetic in order to extremely ironically sort out your own internal identity, then you are missing out. But schizos come in all different shapes and sizes, and being able to differentiate between them is key to looking cool and fitting in. Come with me on a journey to decipher each and every one of all the schizophrenic subtypes. Schizoids. I'm starting with schizoids because they're the most misunderstood of all schizos. Schizoids don't actually experience what most of us associate with schizophrenic traits. On the internet, we often refer to people who are being delusional as schizoid, but this is actually inaccurate. What we actually mean to say is the much more beloved and widely accepted term, schizo. In brief, to understand schizoids, you just have to understand positive and negative symptoms of schizophrenia. Positive symptoms are like delusions, psychosis, hallucinations, stuff that's added to the baseline human experience. The negative symptoms are things that are taken away from that experience, like avolition, the no desire to do anything. The schizoid has the negative symptoms of schizophrenia, not the positive one. So, how do we spot a schizoid? Well, schizoids are typically holed up in their room, not interacting with anybody, probably doesn't get enjoyment from very much, probably doesn't have much motivation to do anything or talk to anybody. Harkening back to the idea that all mental illness can be conceptualized as an excess of a personality slider, we would probably say that schizoids have an excess of openness, an excess of introversion, and probably an excess of neuroticism. So now you know not to call somebody who is babbling over signs and hallucinating and clearly exhibiting many positive symptoms a schizoid. You want to use the much better term schizo, which all schizophrenics agree is a good term that everyone should use. Phew, that was a close one. You almost embarrassed yourself out of this group. You almost embarrassed yourself out of this group. You almost embarrassed. Schizotypals. Schizophrenia exists on a spectrum, much like autism, and just like autism, it exists in varying degrees of severity. Schizotypy refers to this spectrum of schizophrenia and typically exists on the middle to low end of it. I have no sources for this, but I'm right and you know I'm right.
Okay, turns out it's been thought of before. Fuck, I gotta interview these guys.
So how do we identify a schizotypal? Well, schizotypals are a little bit schizo, but they're not so schizo that they've lost all control over their functions and are in a psych ward. They can hold down a job, okay? They can exist in society. They're just a little off. They're a little weird. They may have magical thinking. They may possess a rock or a crystal that they put undue importance onto. They might really believe in the power of like, oh, I thought this thing and so it happened. Maybe they communicate with ghosts. Maybe they founded a cult or a religion or a political movement. It's hard to give a specific example of what schizotypals will do because all schizotypals will do different things, but you'll know it when you see it. Really, what you're looking for here is someone that if they took a few steps deeper into that psychic realm, they would fall off the deep end and end up in a psych ward. Now, unlike schizophrenia, schizotypy is not a progressive disorder. It's not likely to get worse over time. Well, that is unless they're not actually schizotypal and you're really dealing with it. Prodromal schizophrenic. Prodromal schizophrenics are well on their way to their first psychotic break. Let's give them a hand, everybody. Welcome to the club. Because they are experiencing what is known as an insidious onset, which is compared to the non-insidious kinds of onsetting schizophrenia, I guess. The slow creeping up of symptoms eventually manifesting in full-blown schizophrenia. These guys are like delicious dough, schizophrenic dough put into the schizophrenic oven, just waiting to bake and become delicious schizophrenic cookies. Sure, they might be able to slow it down or stop it with some basic supplementation, but the public has just zero information about... I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole. Don't worry, though. I bet your first psychotic break will be your last. And if not, olanzapine doesn't taste that bad. Hippie schizos. They're basically schizophrenics who have claimed to have cured or put their schizophrenia into remission without using pharmaceutical drugs. Lion's mane, there's a bunch of different case reports all over the place. What you should know about these hippie schizophrenics is that they are all wrong. The bald schizo. This is just a phenotype I've noticed, but I feel like schizophrenic people tend to like also be balding or something. I don't know what's going on there, but I'm just spitballing. Like what? Schizophrenics typically have lower B vitamins. Biotin is B7, which is necessary for hair growth, and also I don't know, something about maybe a vitamin D deficiency. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. All I've noticed is that schizophrenics tend to have that receding hairline. Paranoid schizos. These are targeted individuals who have somehow found out that I've been gang stalking them. For now, they keep me at bay by yelling at me every time I take out my phone to record them, but I'm working on this device that will emit electronic frequencies through their walls and make them tortured while they're in bed, so I'll get them eventually. Autizmophrenics. So I made a video about autismophrenics. You should definitely check that out. It deals with the autism schizophrenia spectrum, but essentially what the autistic schizophrenic is doing is not only being schizophrenic enough to make a lateral uncontrolled connection, but also being autistic enough to build out that connection and form it fully, to be able to commit to that connection they've made and make it real. And once it's real, it's almost like, you know, you were never mentally ill in the first place because the thing that you made became real. And so that's a nice little thought, isn't it? This is the kind of schizo I aim to be, schizotistic, and I actually recommend all schizos aim to become more autistic in a way that doesn't make them neurotypical. You can recognize someone that is schizotistic by the fact that they are extremely cool and based. Schizoaffective. If you're trying to identify a schizo and you can't tell if they are schizophrenic or bipolar, then you can call them schizoaffective. That puts you on the same level of diagnostic ability as the psychologists. Okay, I'm just gonna say it. Bipolar One people, they get the honorary schizo pass, okay? They're in the group. Bipolar One people are not technically schizophrenic, okay? The word schizo is nowhere in their name, but in my opinion, anyone who is capable of spiraling into psychotic mania is in the club, okay? That and gatekeeping schizophrenia is too ironic, even for me. Introverted intuitives. Now we get into Jungian cognitive functions. Yay. All right, so the introverted intuitive has basically taken the introverted intuitive cognitive function to the point of mental illness. And it's to the point where every piece of information that this schizo gets is synthesized immediately into a singular worldview that just is unchanging. So essentially, once your introverted intuitive has like a frame for how the world is working, essentially, they're trying to create a grand unified theory of everything, and they're trying to take everything and make it fit into their plan, into their idea of how the world works. So for example, if I think that everything is about autism and schizophrenia, then every piece of information that I get is going to be reinforcing that framework and being slotted into that framework, and I'm going to be making like a million different exceptions in the framework to make everything fit. Now, of course, you should never confuse introverted intuition with Gnostic autism, okay? They're completely different. The extroverted intuitive is kind of the inverse of that. They see one thing and they make it into many things. And to the point of mental illness, it's when you see one thing, you experience one thing, and then it becomes everything else. These schizos can be identified by more confused thoughts, more of an inability to act, more of an inability to make decisions. Everything is everything else versus sort of more of a condensation of knowledge and information. Does this map neatly onto Gnostic schizophrenia? Yes, exactly. Unless it doesn't. Fake schizos. These are neurotypicals with no schizophrenic or schizotypal symptoms. Fake schizo is essentially taking schizophrenia, a real and debilitating illness, and turning it into a kind of, I don't know, clickbaity aesthetic. You can identify these schizos by the fact that they their idea of schizophrenia comes from the movie Split, which is about multiple personality disorder. You're living in my walls, huh? Banger tweet. These are easily the worst kinds of people. They lack identity, drifting from subculture to subculture, appropriating the aesthetic while never being able to truly understand the depths, complexities, and nuances of the subcultures they seek to inhabit. Luckily, though, I have olanzapine tablets, the pseudo-schizo. So this is a new term I've just invented, but bear with me. Currently, we live in the age of schizophrenia. This is an undeniable fact because it fits my narrative. Because of the schizophrenic age we live in, and because of the schizophrenizing force that the internet plays on the human mind, by which I mean taking that which is concrete and making it abstract, also clown-to-clown communication. Many people with no predisposition towards schizophrenia end up acting out the traits of a schizophrenic. Perfectly neurotypical people induce schizophrenic traits within themselves for a variety of reasons, one of which might be simply believing the delusions of another. And this is where the line between the schizo and the no schizo becomes oh so blurred. If you post on the internet, you are subjecting yourself to an unfeeling black box algorithm that knows you better than you know yourself. It's like it's reading your thoughts like a book. You may believe yourself shadow banned or targeted or harassed in some way, and maybe you're right, but also maybe you're wrong, and probably you are wrong. Probably you're not shadow banned. Probably your tweets just haven't been bangers. But the way that you're being persecuted seems very real to you, and also maybe you are being persecuted, right? That's actually a legitimate fear. It's a legitimate thing that does happen. And so you're desperate for patterns to make an increasingly confusing world make sense. You may believe strange things, wrong things about the shape of the planet or the shape of your mind. Some of those things you may believe until they become true, and then find others who find it true as well, and then both of you can just think about how true
So are
it
these
is. People schizo? Is it schizo to hold yourself up in your room anymore? Is it still schizo when it's what the government asks of you? There's very little difference between a doomsday prepper who's storing food because they had a dream about the apocalypse and someone who just read the news. A new breed of schizophrenia, a non-biologically determined one. A contagious one, deliberately handcrafted to pierce the mind of the most impenetrable. How do you identify a pseudo-schizo? Look at what you see after the screen goes black.